challenge of governance is to see how we can leverage what is on the ground and convert this to wealth for the people.
Russia, China are gaining entry into Africa, and it would appear that some Western countries are losing out.
You're working as an expatriate worker, then you're paid in your currency. But then if you must spend those money, you need to convert those money to the local currency to spend.
For Social Security to work, we need to know exactly how many we are. We don't have a precise number. We need to know exact location of people.
When we address this exchange rate volatility, we will see definitely cost of goods and services will come down.
From a security point of view, we should employ the technology to ensure that we can track individuals and goods within the continent.
This is Early Exchange with Femi Ayodele.
You know, the Early Exchange is all about shaping policy and advanced development with our conversation. Today, we're set to give you the best of programming.
And Blessing Aiche.
We do hope that you enjoy every time you spend with us here today. The world needs peace. The world needs to come to a round table and find solutions to the pockets of troubles.
Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Yes, it's a beautiful Thursday morning and another opportunity for us to look at issues related to business, finance, the economy, and even global affairs. This is Early Exchange, and I am Femi Ayodele. Today we'll be shaping policy and advancing development with our conversation. As usual, we'll be looking at the economic alliance ongoing between BRICS nations, countries that belong to the economic bloc. What are some of the steps that they are taking in recent times and the kind of alliance ongoing between members of this economic bloc and the impact on the Western influence? That's what we'll be looking at today. We're also not going to forget what will be the impact of that for Nigeria. There's this advocacy for Nigeria to join that bloc, and what will be the impact of that if that happens. Don't forget, your voice must be heard on this program. This implies that you can be part of the conversation by going on our social media platform, on our YouTube page, to share your view on the advocacy for Nigeria to become a member of the bloc. And also, it's a 2-hour drive, so you need to get set. If you have your coffee, if you have your tea, if preferable, your breakfast is ready. That makes it suitable. We are ready for you. And Blessing is also here to give you the best of programming and make your day worthwhile. Let's say good morning.
Good morning, Femi.
Always looking radiant.
Yes, it's either you look radiant or you look radiant. There's no other choice.
It's a two-way thing, so we have to complement each other.
All right, thank you. And talking about breakfast, so bring your breakfast quite early. This is your intellectual breakfast. You can go on and have the other one, which is food for your stomach to provide the energy you need to run the day. But you need to have something your mind is thinking about and to have new information that will help and add value to your life. Let's start now by getting you updated on current happenings with the news.
Hello and welcome to News Update. I am Juvi Ofiene. The Nigerian House of Representatives is proposing a transition from the current presidential system to a parliamentary model through the 3 bills introduced for constitutional amendments. Spearheaded by Minority Leader Honorable Kingsley Chinda and 59 others, the bill advocates for a prime minister to lead the government, pushing the president to a ceremonial role and integrating elected officials from the legislature into executive positions. According to them, this will help to enhance accountability, streamline governance, and reduce the exorbitant costs associated with the current system. By igniting a national discourse on governance, proponents envision a more efficient and responsive administration, fostering progress and development across the nation. Still in Nigeria, the Nigerian cocoa farmers and exporters are reaping substantial rewards amidst global surge in cocoa prices caused by a significant devaluation of the naira. with the cocoa cost nearly doubling since the beginning of the year and reaching a historic peak of $5,874 per ton on February 8. Adverse weather conditions in leading West African producers such as Ivory Coast and Ghana have triggered a supply shortage, propelling prices upward. According to the financial market dealers' quotations, the depreciation of the naira has further inflated cocoa prices, with data indicating a staggering 344% increase in prices compared to December 2023 locally. As cocoa farmers enjoy farm gate prices ranging from 6.5 to 7 million naira per ton, exporters are witnessing robust demand, with a ton fetching between 8 and 8.5 million naira. This increase in global prices has revitalized the cocoa sector, prompting farmers to expand production and signaling a promising outlook for Nigerian cocoa industry. And away from Nigeria, Kenyan shilling rose to its highest level in over 3 months on Wednesday, supported by growing confidence in the government's ability to repay a euro bond maturing in June. With a gain of over 3% against the US dollar, the shilling showcased resilience compared to its previous close of 155.50/156.50. Kenya's recent issuance of $1.5 billion euro bond maturing in 2031 aimed at repurchasing a substantial portion of the $2 billion international bond due in June contributed to the positive sentiment. The anticipation of Eurobond repayment reduces panic buying of foreign currency, which had driven the shilling to repeated record lows since late 2021. Additionally, foreign inflows into a 7 billion shilling infrastructure bond and the central bank's stance, supported by recent interest rate hikes, further improved the currency. Away from Africa to the UK, Governor Bank of England Andrew Bailey has expressed optimism regarding Britain's recent inflation data, deeming it good news as it aligned closely with the central bank's expectation and indicated early signs of economic recovery. Despite consumer prices rising by 4.0% in the 12th month to January, slightly lower than projected, Bailey remained encouraged, highlighting the stability compared to potential situations. While the bank maintained its benchmark rate of 5.25%, signaling a forthcoming rate cut, investors look forward to a shift as early as June following the release of inflation figures. Furthermore, Bailey emphasized the need for clearer evidence of reducing wage growth before considering interest rate cuts, citing the importance of falling inflation in shaping inflation expectations and wage bargaining. Additionally, he noted indications of a potential economic rebound despite uncertainty over whether Britain experienced a shallow recession in late 2023. And lastly, China's BYD Company Limited is set to establish a new electric vehicle factory in Mexico, aiming to create an export hub to the United States, recently surpassing Tesla Incorporated to become the world's leading EV manufacturer in terms of sales. BYD plans to conduct feasibility study for the Mexican plant while negotiating with officials over location and terms. According to BYD Mexico country manager Zhong Zhong, despite its strong presence in China, the auto company seeks global expansion by constructing overseas plants and increasing Chinese exports. With Mexico's robust automaking sector closely linked to the U.S. industry, the company's move shows the importance of international production for a global brand. Meanwhile, in Latin America, BYD eyes a significant investment in Brazil, setting aside $620 million for a new industrial complex in northeastern Bahia state. And that's all there is for now. Early Exchange continues in a bit with Femi Ayodele and Blessing Ehiche. I am Juvi Ofiene. Many thanks for watching.
All right, thank you, Juby, for the news update. Now it's time for us to look at our major conversation for today, looking at the influence and the kind of cooperation, the economic ties ongoing between BRICS nations. It's just an economic bloc that started in 2006 with 4 nations: Brazil, India, Russia, China. And now in the year 2010, South Africa also joined the economic bloc, adding to the acronym S, and that's why you have it to be BRICS. But the question is, what kind of influence is this economic bloc bringing to nations, especially Africa? And now that there's advocacy for Nigeria to join the economic bloc, how is this going to play out? These are things that our guest analysts will help us to resolve and provide a better perspective as regards this development. We're being joined by our in-house analysts. We have Sam Oruji here with us this morning.
Good morning, Femi. My pleasure to be here.
Join us.
Good morning.
Good morning, Blessing. Thank you.
All right, so we're starting on a global scale, looking at the development and the kind of economic ties and cooperation, ongoing between the BRICS nations. It's the acronym from the word BRICS, the acronym for the first letter of the founding members of this economic bloc. You have Brazil, Russia, India, China, and in 2010 you have South Africa. But let's provide a background to this so that our viewers will understand why the influence of this group is becoming crucial at this time. Talk about the purpose, the essence of having this kind of economic bloc, and the kind of influence it's bringing on a global scale to economic issues.
Thank you very much. You already laid some background, but in 2006, where BRIC, not BRICS, was formed in Russia, you had just Brazil, Russia, India, and China. Then in 2010, South Africa joined. So first, the major imperative for that bloc was to improve originally on foreign investment flow among those countries that constitutionalized the BRICS. Then South Africa was invited specifically by China to join in 2010. But as we speak, in terms of size and geopolitical and economic stature of that bloc has increased. With effect from January 1, 2024, we had countries like Egypt, Iran, United Arab Emirates, and some other country have joined that bloc. So they are growing in power in terms of geopolitical influence and power. They are growing in economic stability in terms of the relationship that exists. They actually form a bank called the New Development Bank, where they are trying to float a currency that these new other countries will benefit from. So it's a challenge for the G7, for the G20, and other geopolitical considerations at the global stage. But I think beyond economics, there are equally power issues, geopolitical power issues, that they are trying to see how far they can stabilize other power bloc within the international system.
All right, this challenge that seems to be targeting the dollar from the BRICS nation, when Europe came together and created a single currency for Europe, it wasn't necessarily about the dollar, but this move by the BRICS to create a single currency, to increase their number and to strengthen trade amongst them, targeting the dollar. What do you owe it against?
I think within international politics, international economic relations, nations are sovereign nations, so they have the power to make decisions that will impact on the economic interests of their respective countries. So I don't think there's anything wrong in trying to see how people can form geopolitical and economic bloc to better the lives of their citizens. So if the focus is on trying to see the dominance of the United States of America and the West in terms of trade relationship. And certain blocs are trying to provide an alternative platform in terms of international trade. I think, in my view, is a welcome development, because American dominance and influence since the Second World War has affected a lot of relationships. So if they are able to put a common currency that will improve on their trade relationship, I think there's nothing wrong in that.
All right. Let's look at what may likely play out, because the target is looking at to weighing down the influence of the Western authority and see how this bloc could provide alternatives. How do you see that playing out in coming months, that you'll be having more members joining the bloc? Do you see that influence as something that should be of interest to the U.S. or to the Western authorities? And how will this impact Africa if this economic bloc becomes something, a force to reckon with, especially for Africa?
It's already a force to reckon with. I think within that space, you have Ethiopia, you have Egypt already there. So if let's even look at it from the population dynamics of those countries that make up the BRICS. Then we'll look at their GDP and look at their standing. Look at, let's take Brazil. Brazil has over 200-something million people. The population is far greater than the population of Nigeria. Talk about Russia.
Russia, China.
Talk about China, 1.3 billion. Talk about India, 1.2 billion. Then you come to Egypt, 50-something. Come to Ethiopia, 100-something million. So by the time you put those population together, you will know that it's a force to be reckoned with. So, but the way that will shape cannot be speculated now, but with the growing influence of China, I think America really is really afraid, in quote now, of China. And China is trying to say, I can rally around with Russia to put more people into that bloc. And I think they are very resolved in terms to see how they can get a parallel financial instrument that people can use to trade within the international system to run concurrently with the dollar. I see that's where the politics is.
Let's look at the feasibility of another currency running concurrently with the dollar for international trade. How feasible is that, being that for almost every international trade that you have to do, it has to be based on the dollar?
It's very feasible. You know, at the formation of the United Nations after the Second World War, America and the other great power play a major role. And the Bretton Woods institutions, the World Bank, the IMF, these words, were brought into being for development purposes to make a quick recovery from the damage from the Second World War. To that extent, that has been a dominant currency in international trade. But international politics is very dynamic, and nations are constantly aligning and realigning in terms of what they do, to the extent that that alignment will bring about new changes in the international system. And there's a great resolve among the international players to see how they can reform the other institutions, so that the other America doesn't even hold everybody to ransom. So it's feasible. If a bloc just started with about 5 countries, and within the last, say, 14 years, you have about 6 or 7 other countries. Argentina was supposed to be among those ones that was supposed to join in 2024, but for the internal political dynamics, they pull out around November last year. But talks are ongoing that more countries will come into that bloc.
Now, let's look critically what will be the impact of this for Africa, because it's also good to situate it well. Now, these are emerging markets who somehow, they are developing countries whose influence, economic influence, cannot be pushed aside. Now, but for Africa, what will be the impact of this for the African continent? And then looking at the membership, do you see more African countries coming on board, especially the giant of Africa, which is Nigeria?
Well, I cannot speculate whether Nigeria will eventually join, but the rate at which that bloc is growing, and if you look at the two major power broker within that zone, I'm not too sure if more countries in Africa will join, maybe within the next 1 year. After the last summit they had last year, they had these new people. Look at Iran. Let's even come to Africa. Egypt and Ethiopia are already there. Look at UAE, with just about 9-point-something million people. They are in that block. So if you look at the major masquerades there, China, Russia, and possibly India. And if you look at the volume of trade between India, China, and possibly Brazil with Nigeria, quickly I think there's a likelihood that we'll be within that block, and it will be beneficial. Look at the two major elements there. There's geopolitical alliance, there's economic alliance, there's a need for trade and investment. So, and these are the major drivers of international politics or international economic relations, which are critical to any nation survival.
All right, now for the countries that recently joined, how strategic are they to strengthening the BRIC nation, the BRIC bloc? I'm talking about the African countries that recently joined, Ethiopia, Egypt.
No, it's strategic because if you look at the founding philosophy of BRICS, was to improve foreign direct investment. After that, they extended it to improve on trading relationship among the member states. Therefore, even for belonging to that bloc, is already strategic for investment purposes, for trade relationships. So the volume of trade between those countries has even improved over time, and it will continue to improve because new members are coming. So new alignment in terms of trading with these countries will improve their relationship eventually.
But do you see a kind of reciprocity from the U.S. Discontinuing trade or relations with some of these countries?
Well, in my personal view, I don't think U.S. actually possess that moral standing to see how he wants to pull out. What is really the relationship? If you look at the volume of trade and relationship between Africa and even China in the last 10 years, it has quadrupled the relationship between the United States of America, and that cause for worry. And even American politics, they were trying to influence the African Development Bank some 2 years ago because of this trade relationship. So I don't see any issues that if American pull from Africa, then we'll have problems. Relationship that exists with these other blocks will sustain us, in my personal view.
Looking at the growing influence of this bloc, do you think this should be of concern to the Western authorities? And what kind of diplomacy will you expect from the Western authority? What kind of approach, what kind of disposition will you expect looking at this bloc becoming a force to reckon with?
The West in particular and the United States of America has been working to see that this BRICS group does not get to the level to which it will get. So that opposition will always be there. So diplomacy will continue to play out in the way they do business. Mind you, some of these countries that we just spoke about are equally players at the level of G7, at the level of G20. So I think it's diplomacy that will continue to be the major currency of relationship in the international system. So, but I do know for sure that America is worried about the dominance of China in African trade in particular.
All right, so now that the Scotiabank says that the US dollar is set to fall in 2024, and they've made this forecast due to the strengthening of the BRICS alliance and ongoing global inflation trends, is there anything the US can do about this projection?
The Scottish bank, a Canadian bank that does a lot of research in terms of trade and investment, based on their research finding, they're thinking that the trade will deepen to a very large extent, but those forecasts are essentially based on the countries that have just joined from January 1. You look at the volume of trade between Ethiopia and India, you look at the volume of trade between Egypt, Brazil, China, Russia, and all that. So that, to a very large extent, will weaken the influence of America in international trade. And there's no gainsaying that that will negatively impact on them over a period of time. So America will be worried, but to what extent can they stop those relationships need to be seen in the nearest future. But I'm sure that American influence in world trade will gradually decline.
Now let's look at what is the need for, or what is playing out with Nigeria. Officially, Nigeria has not shown interest in being a member of this bloc. There are prominent Nigerians, a good reference is Femi Falana and the likes of them, who are advocating for Nigeria to join the bloc, to break the dominance of dollars. And you know that the Nigerian economy is, is import driven, and so the sensitivity of that currency will always influence our economy. Now, how do you see this playing out? Do you see Nigeria coming forth with this interest soonest, knowing fully well that our president is also occupying a sensitive role as the chairman of ECOWAS, how possible it is, and if this is going to happen, what will be in it for Nigeria? How sensitive is the role that Nigeria will play in this bloc, knowing fully well that you have South Africa? There's this rivalry, this economic rivalry between Nigeria and South Africa. Somehow you have South Africa being at a point the largest economy in Africa, then now Nigeria. So there's always that rivalry. How do you see this playing out for Nigeria, now that we've not officially stated we're becoming a member?
I think let's look at the issues from two perspectives. American will find a way to reduce the membership of that, but that cannot be sustained. On the other hand, if you look at our relationship between China in the last 20 years or so, the volume of concession loan or development loan that has come from China to Nigeria is much compared to whatever we got from the United States of America. And if that is anything to go by, and the influence of China in terms of our development effort, I'm sure over time, China will try to see how they can persuade Nigeria based on the existing relationship. But in my view, I don't think there's any really critical rivalry between Nigeria and South Africa in terms of who is dominant in the African politics. But I think too, if you look at the trade relationship between Nigeria and South Africa, there are lots of investment, South African investment, core investment in Nigeria. And I'm sure that, like they say, is a permanent interest among these nations. And at the end of the day, those are what we speak. But in terms of political engineering, I'm sure Russia and India in particular will persuade Nigeria to join, because if you look at the volume of trade between those countries, it's enormous. And I'm sure interest will be uppermost in the decision making eventually.
But why do you think the Nigerian government is not being proactive about, just like South Africa, being a member of the bloc?
No, you cannot say being proactive. The point is that...
see it as a power.
No. There are power indices that you must look at when you make some decisions. So there may be some people to people or government to government diplomatic relationship that they need to look at over a period of time and find a way to realign with the other persons. So those countries that made decisions to join will have done all their political calculations. So Nigerian may have certain things on the table, so we don't have the information, so we can't speak to it. For example, Argentina made a proposal to join last year with the former president. When the election did not work, a new president came, and the guy wrote a letter to them that, as we speak, based on their political calculation, they will not want to join from January 2024. But they are still ongoing conversation. So they look at all the political calculations, economic calculation, and the diplomatic relationship that exists over the years. So they look at those alignments, what is critical, what is important, what is the long-term view of the decision-making process if we make a decision to join the BRIC nation. But in no distant time, I'm sure that will be brought to the table.
So this courting of Africa by the BRICS and even the US, what benefits does it give Africa? What advantage is it to Africa?
It's essentially...
How can it be used?
Okay. The best relationship here beyond the West, even though the US was not involved in colonization of Africa, but if you look at the West essentially, based on the colonial relationship, in my view, they've not really done well. But countries like Russia, India, and China possibly, what they have done, it may not be the best compared to what the West has done, but China in terms of concession loan that has come into the country in the last 20 to 25 years, vis-a-vis what the colonial master did from independence of most African countries till now, I think this new bride, so to speak, is doing better, in my view. And I think African countries will benefit more, particularly from the position of China, rather than giving aids. They bring concession loans that are tied to development, so that you can see what the level of the impact is still questionable. But I think as the relationship improves, it will be more strategic and that will benefit. But then African leaders, when they go to the table too, they should bring something big to discuss so that they can get a bigger benefit. But it's a win-win situation in my view.
All right, we're still looking at the economic alliance and the cooperation ongoing between BRICS nations, big countries. These are countries that are forces to reckon with. I will go on a short break now, but we'll return, we'll kick off more discussion as regards this development. Stay with us.
My name is Veronica Nkechi Eze.
Charles Abana. My name is Professor Martins Emeje.
Professor Sylvester Odion Akaine.
Keep watching Souq
News TV.
The best news channel online.
It's elevating, it's enlightening, it's educating.
Muhammad Ali found his root in Africa. Rumble in the jungle. I swear the king is humble. Jesse Jackson, O.J. Simpson, this is black history. Andrew Young visit Africa in the late 60s. Legend, Bob Marley make the light different. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X are big names. They fought for black Americans in the old days. We need same revolution in our own ways. Michael Jackson, Janet Jackson, Mr. Jay-Z, Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre and Eddie Murphy. American prosperity ain't complete with African poverty. It's legendary Idris Abdul Karim, and you are on to Souq News. You don't touch that dial.
In the heart of sub-Saharan Africa, where commerce meets progress, welcome to Souq News, your source for business, economy, and development insight that drive nations forward. From the vibrant streets of Lagos, Africa's fastest economic hub, Souq News takes you on a journey of discovery, analyzing and reporting the facts that lay the foundation for growth and development. We don't just report the news, we create it. Souq News is more than a channel. It is a catalyst for change, spotlighting the stories that shape economies, inspire entrepreneurs, and fuel progress. covering business, finance, technology, energy, and many more. Souq News provides a daily deep dive into the stories that matter, interviews with industry titans, and analysis that empowers your understanding of economic landscape. Join us daily as we dissect, discuss, and deliver the most relevant and factual news on business and the economy. Souq News is your trusted guide, empowering you with the knowledge to make informed decisions.
The challenge of governance is to see how we can leverage what is on the ground and convert this to wealth for the people.
Russia, China are gaining entry into Africa, and it would appear that some Western countries are losing out.
You're working as an expatriate worker, then you're paid in your currency. But then if you must spend those money, you need to convert those money to the local currency to spend.
For Social Security to work, we need to know exactly how many we are. We don't have a precise number. We need to know exact location of people.
When we address this exchange rate volatility, we will see definitely cost of goods and services will come down.
From a security point of view, we should employ the technology to ensure that we can track individuals and goods within the continent.
This is Early Exchange with Femi Ayodele.
You know, the Early Exchange is all about shaping policy and advancing development with our conversation. Today, we're set to give you the best of programming.
And Blessing Aiche.
We do hope that you enjoy every time you spend with us here today. The world needs peace. The world needs to come to a round table and find solutions to the pockets of troubles.
Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Yes, it's still your favorite program, Early Exchange, where you get the best of analysis and global issues. We're still looking at
The challenge of governance is to see how we can leverage what is on the ground and convert this to wealth for the people.
Russia, China are gaining entry into Africa, and it would appear that some Western countries are losing out.
You're working as an expatriate worker, then you're paid in your currency. But then if you must spend those money, you need to convert those money to the local currency to spend.
For Social Security to work, we need to know exactly how many we are. We don't have a precise number. We need to know exact location of people.
When we address this exchange rate volatility, we will see definitely cost of goods and services will come down.
From a security point of view, we should employ the technology to ensure that we can track individuals and goods within the continent.
This is Early Exchange with Femi Ayodele.
You know, the Early Exchange is all about shaping policy and advancing development. With our conversation today, we're set to give you the best of programming.
And Blessing Aiche.
We do hope that you enjoy every time you spend with us here today. The world needs peace. The world needs to come to a round table and find solutions to the pockets of troubles.
Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Yes, it's still your favorite program where we advance development with our conversation, and we're still looking at the economic alliance going on between the BRICS nations and what will be the impact for Africa and Nigeria. Sam is still here with us, providing a better perspective as regards this development. Glad to know you're still here with us.
Thank you.
All right. You know, in every union, there are bound to be conflicts, there are bound to be challenges. Now, looking at the peculiarities of these countries coming together to form this bloc, do you foresee clash of interests? You know, are there challenges that might likely occur? Knowing fully well that even the West, you know, has likely criticized this bloc, that there is no unity of purpose. What are the challenges or the threats you see here? Maybe if we do is what I call SWOT analysis.
Okay, I think the issue here is if we remove the politics of the West from it, is that once you go into any association, there are laws, free entry and free exit. So the question should be, what is the level of politics that the West will play to reduce the number of people that will join eventually? On the other hand, I think the commonality of interest is how to advance trade. Therefore, I don't really see any geopolitical clash among the countries that have decided to come into this alliance, in my view. They are strategic, even though there's element of politics or political undertone, but the larger economic interest will not make them have issues. And if you look at the trajectory so far, even at the point where South Africa joined in 2010, the level of advancement that has been made and the number of people showing interest to come into that bloc shows that the political interest will not really be a major issue. Even if American decide to sponsor and which most international, these big countries do, but then it has come to stay is an international intergovernmental organization with the sole aim of advancing trade. So I don't see in the nearest future that a new alliance will come that will forge some difficult scenarios within the membership. Rather, I suspect that by the next summit, again, maybe towards the end of the year, wherever that will take place, I don't have that offhand, but I think more people will join that union. And what I think will be a major challenge is the common currency they are trying to float, and how sustainable will it be in terms of how other countries can even use those. Then the role of the World Trade Organization is trying to see how they can use their instrument of trade facilitation to enhance the relationship among those countries.
Without another currency competing or running side by side the dollar, would it be possible to achieve the de-dollarization aim? And if that is not achieved, reducing the influence of the US and the West, would it become a possibility?
No, I think it's possible. I think, in my view, if you read the literatures in the public sphere and some research work, I think those countries are resolved to see how they can float another common currency that they can use to trade. And the more those countries are able to trade with themselves, without...
But having a second currency, so to speak, aside the dollar, how would that impact the global financial system?
Of course, more people who are within those blocks will trade with those new financial instruments. Therefore, the dominance of dollar as a unit of exchange in the international trade will be weakened.
But doesn't that result to a kind of fragmentation in the financial system? So it means that when you want to trade with a certain block, you get to use one type of currency. When you want to trade with others, you use the dollar.
But I'm even worried that using one dominant currency to trade is not even good. We're in a multipolar system. Therefore, those currencies that we trade with internationally should not just be centralized because of American influence since the Second World War. So if we have, it's not fragmentation, rather it's going to reduce the dominance of certain countries, the way they shape trade policy. So once there's competition, then people will benefit. I'm sure that once that common currency comes into fruition, then it will help in terms of even the demand for the dollar, particularly Africa and Nigeria, where the demand for dollar is like, if you don't have dollar, you can't even survive in the next 24 hours. In my personal view, I think once this flotation come into being, then that will be good. And they already have a new development bank that's over billions of US dollar in terms of equivalent. And if you look at the major countries, they have, if you combine their GDP, they are over 28 trillion US dollars. So those are not kind of country that you can play with. If they really form that alliance and that currency come, then let the dollar go to sleep for some time, in my view.
Talking about the effort to de-dollarize, the economies of those nations, there is a report suggesting, in fact, Russia has stood up since, to strengthen its own local currency since the war started, and is hoping that other nations also will follow that route. Now that it's a critical agenda for them, for these nations, how serious what kind of seriousness do you think African members of this bloc will put into this agenda, knowing fully well that most of the economies you have in Africa, they are import-driven? How sensitive will that be? And then how successful is it going to be? Like Russia and some of the big nations in this bloc, there's a report suggesting that they've reached a dollar in most of their local trade to like about 95%. But looking at the African members, South Africa, Ethiopia, and the rest of them, who, when you look at the economies, they're import-driven, how successful is it going to be, this agenda to de-dollarize the economies of these members?
When those countries subscribe to join, there's what the Americans say, what is in it for me. So therefore, there's something in it for them. And once they draw those kind of trade relationship with the specific countries, and this is the way we want to trade, this is a unit of exchange, this is a currency that we want to use, then it becomes automatically beneficial for those countries that are member. So in terms of flow of trade, it becomes easy because they already subscribe to a common unit of exchange among the member. So for Africa, and let's look at the countries in terms of ranking. South Africa is there, then after South Africa, Egypt, then Ethiopia. And if you look at the relationship that exists between South Africa and China and India a greater majority of some of the business people in South Africa are actually of Indian origin. So they have a very good trade relationship. Then come to Egypt. Egypt is within the power indices, is equally a medium power, and they have what it takes to trade with these people, and it will benefit their citizens. So I don't have any doubt in my mind that this new relationship strategically will benefit the African countries that are playing there, and is an opportunity too for Russia in particular to do more business with Africa, and I think they are having their legs here already. But for China, the relationship, even in Ethiopia, most of the infrastructure that was developed in the last 30 years were done by China. Just the same way we're doing with our road development, road network, hydropower. Even state governments are pushing India for those concession loans so that they can develop. So I think it's a welcome development for Africa. The West will now sit up and they will struggle as well to see how they can re-engineer or recalibrate the existing relationship in terms of trade with Africa.
So in the West struggling now to maintain position of dominance, do you foresee the fallout, or do you foresee that happening, that some other organizations that these countries that are members of the BRIC bloc begin to either pull out of some other associations that they are part of with the West and the US?
I think there's alignment, realignment, and as I say, generally is that no permanent friend, no permanent enemy, but permanent interest. So I think that is what will play out in terms of geopolitical alliance, economic alliances. Wherever your interests are as a nation, that's where those countries will go. So constantly, there will be realignment within the international system, and I think there will be complete breakdown, even in spite of the mutual suspicion that exists between the big five. New alignments are coming. Once it's strategic to those countries, then I don't think there'll be any problem. Well, even the global architecture even actually needs reworking the way it's presently constituted. So these new developments are welcome. We are becoming more multipolar rather than unipolar, where America and some of the big countries in the West begin to provide too much dominance for other smaller countries to breathe.
I'm thinking the move by this bloc to float a common currency, what impact will it have on the desire to have one currency in Africa as well? If that succeeds, what do you think might likely be the impact on the desire to have one currency in Africa? You know, efforts have been made. You have the issue of the visa-free policy, and effort is also being made to have a common currency for Africa. Now, for some members who are part of this bloc, who are African members, could that threaten the move also to have a unified currency in Africa?
No, I don't think so, because what we're speaking to here, you're talking about international relation, international trade. So the point here, when you create a common currency, you're just talking about how you can ease trade among member states. That does not stop other economic blocs to develop a currency that can stimulate trade among themselves. But the politics of a common currency in Africa leave much to be desired. Because the way Africa is constituted with this colonial configuration is a major challenge. Even within the sub-region, the ECOWAS, in the last how many years of it, about 43 years, going to 44 years of the Economic Community of West Africa, there's been a design for a common currency to enhance the protocol on free trade and movement. But as we speak, the various central banks, a small membership, have not been able to achieve that. But these big players, I'm sure because of the major benefits, will achieve that common currency even earlier than these other blocks. So, but there's a challenge for the African But even the free trade agreement, Continental Free Trade Agreement, that came into force since 2021, shortly before the COVID, see a major challenge where you have a population that's almost at par with China and India. Then we're having problem in deploying the African Free Continental Free Trade Agreement to even trade among ourselves, and we'll be able to compete. We equally have that big population. If we put our house in order, we become a superpower as well in terms of how you play in the international arena.
All right, as a wrap up, let's look at the ability of the BRICS to actually break political influence, and in what way would that affect world peace? America has been fingered on some occasions as being behind some crises in some nations. But now that we have Russia, China, and some other countries coming together, what impact will it have on world peace?
All right, that bloc is already a geopolitical bloc. So there's a power currency in terms of how they deploy power in managing global peace. So that again will help to strengthen the relationship, particularly among those members. There are countries that the West, particularly America, suspect in terms of what they do, particularly Iran, now have a configuration with Russia. So the mutual suspicion will increase. But then it will equally help to balance the geopolitical alignment among those major players. But I think in terms of sustaining global peace and security, this new bloc will help to cushion that mutual suspicion, because some people belonging to blocs, so they will discuss certain things that are geopolitically relevant to them, while they're advancing their economic or trade interests. So I don't think there's anything wrong. Rather, the US, that is always mouthing democracy and the rule of law, more often than not, in my view, has always been a major problem, because sometimes they do what you call double standard and selective morality in international politics that has not helped the world in advancing global solidarity from the perspective of peace building and peace initiative.
So in a nutshell, what you're saying, this might create some form of balance?
I think so.
Okay. So thank you very much, Sam Oroji, for talking with us this morning as we looked at the BRIC nation, the BRIC bloc rather, and their impact on the world and also on the dollar. All right, so we'll take a quick break. On the return, Sam Oroji is still here, but looking at something more Nigerian. Stay tuned.
3 wise men. Iconic sculptures and statues adorn major metropolitan cities of the world. In Lagos, Nigeria, the statue of 3 men designed to depict the state's cultural heritage and to usher in visitors and tourists into the ever-accommodating center of excellence is no doubt an astounding work of art. Originally built under the administration of Colonel Raji Rasaki, designed by Bodu Shodende in 1991 and standing over 12 feet high, referred to as Agba Meta or Aro Meta, the 3 sculptured chiefs were placed along the Lagos-Ibadan toll gate to welcome people coming into Lagos State. The statue, called the 3 Wise Men, by many has become a major signature for the state. 3 white-capped chiefs, clad in white wrappers, knotted across their shoulders and with clenched right fists, are shown in the artwork. The images fascinate and create impressions in the minds of visitors coming into the state, captivating the attention of visitors who look with keen interest, pondering on the messages which the posture of the engraved images signifies. The 3 Wise Men has been relocated thrice from its original position at Ojodu Berger end of Lagos-Ibadan Expressway to Magodo area before its final relocation to its present site at Olowopopo Drive. The sculpture has suffered severe damages over the years and renovated. Bodu Shodende, through this sculpture, depicted the highest honor that can be afforded to anyone in the Eko's cultural heritage and to usher in visitors and tourists into the ever-accommodating center of excellence is in no doubt an astounding work of art. Originally built under the administration of Colonel Raji Rasaki, designed by Bodu Shodende in 1991 and standing over 12 feet high, referred to as Agba Meta or Aro Meta, the three sculptured chiefs were placed along the Lagos-Ibadan toll gate to welcome people coming into Lagos State. The statue called the Three Wise Men by many has become a major signature for the state. Three white-capped chiefs clad in white wrappers, knotted across their shoulders and with clenched right fists are shown in the artwork. The images fascinate and create impressions in the minds of visitors coming into the state, captivating the attention of visitors who look with keen interest, pondering on the messages which the posture of the engraved images signifies. The Three Wise Men has been relocated thrice from its original position at Ojodu Berger end of Lagos-Ibadan Expressway to Magodo area before its final relocation to its present site at Olowopopo Drive. The sculpture has suffered severe damages over the years and renovated. Bodu Shodende, through this sculpture, depicted the highest honor that can be afforded to anyone in the Eko greeting tradition. The Three Wise Men, Arometa, Souq, Enlightenment. In the heart of sub-Saharan Africa, where commerce meets progress, welcome to Souq News, your source for business, economy, and development insight that drive nations forward. From the vibrant streets of Lagos, Africa's fastest economic hub, Souq News takes you on a journey of discovery, analyzing and reporting the facts that lay the foundation for growth and development. We don't just report the news, we create it. Souq News is more than a channel. It is a catalyst for change, spotlighting the stories that shape economies, inspire entrepreneurs, and fuel progress. Covering business, finance, technology, energy, and many more, Souq News provides a daily deep dive into the stories that matter, interviews with industry titans, and analysis that empowers your understanding of economic landscape. Join us daily as we dissect, discuss, and deliver the most relevant and factual news on business and the economy. Souq News is your trusted guide, empowering you with the knowledge to make informed decisions.
The challenge of governance is to see how we can leverage what is on the ground and convert this to wealth for the people.
Russia, China are gaining entry into Africa, and it would appear that some Western countries are losing out.
You're working as an expatriate worker, then you're paid in your currency. But then if you must spend those money, you need to convert those money to the local currency to spend.
For Social Security to work, we need to know exactly how many we are. We don't have a precise number. We need to know exact location of people.
When we address this exchange rate volatility, we will see definitely cost of goods and services will come down.
From a security point of view, we should employ the technology to ensure that we can track individuals and goods within the continent.
This is Early Exchange with Femi Ayodele.
You know, the Early Exchange is all about shaping policy and advancing development. With our conversation today, we're set to give you the best of programming.
And Blessing Aiche.
We do hope that you enjoy every time you spend with us here today. The world needs peace. The world needs to come to a round table and find solutions to the pockets of troubles.
Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Many thanks for being there. We're so glad that you're with us on Early Exchange. Now let's look at power, because every production depends on power. Yes, for quite a long time, the federal government of Nigeria says it has been subsidizing electricity, and often discos have come out with reports saying there is need to increase electricity tariff to become cost reflective, and most often it has been approved by NEC. Now this time the government is saying that it cannot sustain subsidizing power. And even the IMF advised the Nigerian government that it should remove completely fuel and electricity subsidies, saying that they are too costly. What will be the implication of this on Nigerians and even the manufacturing sector that has already been hit by so many economic challenges? Sam Oroje, who is Director, Research Policy and Development in Souq News, and also our in-house analyst, is still in the studio with us this morning and will be speaking to that. First of all, let's look at power and its relevance in production and in everyday living. So, people have often talked about power being expensive, not necessarily being a challenge, but that it's available. But it seems to be a two-way traffic. It's expensive and it's also not very available. And the government says that it has been providing subsidy for power over a long time, even though that's debatable. And now it's saying it cannot continue sustaining that subsidy. What's your take on it in terms of, first of all, the availability of the power, and secondly, the cost of the power?
Okay, the availability is a major problem from the perspective of the fact that the operators in that sector, disco, whatever, in that value chain, do not have access to the inputs to drive their processes. So the cost is high on the other hand. Number two, the operating environment is tough. Those who made investment in those sector are not able to recoup their investment. And when those borrowings were initiated, the borrowings or the lending were two-digit lending figure. That again put up their operating costs. So when you make an investment, first and foremost, you have to stay in business, even if you have not even made profit. I'm sure that many of those companies can't even break even. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, the government did unbundle that sector, and the impression that was given, where that was done during Jonathan's administration, was that they are now profit-making venture, and that they can provide energy to the greater majority of Nigeria, but that has not come into fruition. So this challenge is much, but I think the government is really going to have a very difficult time managing his perception if, for example, the first subsidy, the issues have not even been resolved, the negative impact on the citizen. Then if IMF is advising and the government is complaining that they can no longer sustain subsidy in terms of what they were providing for electricity consumption that is not even available in the first instance, then what are you talking about manufacturing? We're not even talking about social consumption. That means you're going to drive most of the businesses underground. Then the savings that we're told that will be made from first subsidy, even though that the money is not somewhere in a basket, we have not seen the impact. So it's going to be a very difficult communication message that the government is going to pass to the citizens. It's going to really be difficult. Subsidies removed for fuel. You're talking about electricity subsidy. So the government cannot subsidize anything. Then the cost of this subsidy will be passed to the majority of the people. The employment figures are not looking very rosy. You have security challenge. Even though part of security, terrorism is there, you have all banditry, kidnapping, and all these overlapping drivers of conflict. To what extent can this advisory from IMF be sustainable? I think I'm just looking at how the government can manage the public perception. It's going to really be very difficult to pass that message. Now they have to find a way to subsidize that. If the money that is coming from the saving from the fuel subsidy is translated into electricity, I think that would be a welcome development, rather than unsustainable social intervention that they give, what they normally call palliatives.
Let's put the statistics here. Maybe that will help you to understand why the federal government is saying this is not sustainable. You have already, still some bills to be paid by the federal government to the tune of 1.3 trillion. And then you have electricity subsidy, which has increased to 3.3 trillion now. But if you look at the provision in the budget, according to the minister, now that's why it's concerned, it's about 450 billion naira. And now you're having a projection of 3.3 trillion naira for the year. Looking at these factors, do you think it's something sustainable on the part of the government? You are dealing with debt on the other hand, you're dealing with shortage of funds, knowing fully well also that Nigerians are still not recovering or are recovering from the effect of removal of fuel subsidy. How sustainable it is, in the face of the realities of revenue that are decreasing here and there, how sustainable it is. Isn't that enough for the federal government to take up this decision and say, oh, we need to jettison this idea of electricity subsidy? And if that happens, what will be the impact of that on Nigeria?
I'm always worried when they brandish figures from the public service. Who consume the 450 billion electricity in the first place? Why were they carrying those consumptions over a period of time? We need to interrogate that first and foremost. Two, if the government feel that paying those tariffs are not sustainable, what kind of investment option is the government making in that sector over a period of years so that you have a program to remove the subsidy? That's another narrative that must sustain. So what do you want to put in place? I don't want to pay subsidies for electricity. What can I do as a government for the next 3 years? Because this government is almost spending 1 year, and in another 2 years we'll be talking about politics of 2027. So what is a roadmap? You want to remove subsidy by the year 2025, first quarter. This is what I'm paying as subsidy. This is the kind of investment I want to make as a government in this sector, so that when I remove subsidy first quarter of 2025, then the citizen can absorb the shocks, because they have not even come to terms with the fuel subsidy. And they see this debate that this so-called fuel subsidy, there's nothing wrong with it, but how the operation was done, and that the government should open up that space and let's do some very thorough investigation of what went somewhere and what was actually the subsidy. So I don't subscribe, and it's going to have industrial relation issues with the labor movement. If, for example, you're even talking about minimum wage, that's not even sustainable in the first place. The 30,000 minimum wage cannot even take you in terms of transportation. So if you now remove subsidy, they are passing the buck to the citizens. And the primary purpose of government is to provide security and welfare. So this conversation not mere conversation that the IMF came here, that for you to sustain your financials, you should remove subsidy from electricity. What are the solutions before you remove the subsidy? So those advisories, to a very large extent, are important, but the welfare of the citizens should be uppermost in the mind of the government. That's my personal submission.
All right, let's even look at the operations of the distribution companies, the DISCOs. Now, the problem of metering has always been there, and there's been the clamor several times, even by civil society organizations, for the provision of meters instead of estimated billings. Now, if meters are provided, do you think it would be easy for the DISCOs themselves to measure what is the quantity of electricity supply, and it would be easy for them to get their payment? Because meters, with the prepaid meters, you have to pay for the service before you get it. Because the sector is struggling with liquidity issue. Would that help it and even reduce this frequent call for increase in tariff?
I think in terms of operation, I think they are struggling. It's very expensive to provide energy. And I don't think that those tariffs, if you really look at it across the continent, even in Africa, I think the tariffs are still relatively low, not making case for the DISCO. But what is critical that those businesses must do, that they must provide metering for their consuming public. Metering is very critical to what we call revenue assurance. Once you do those metering, and most of them are prepaid, then your cash flow, you can have a sustainable cash flow that you can trust, because those monies come in. Where there's a sabotage with the operatives, they come and give you what we call estimated billing. That's just to corrupt the system. So the management of those DISCO must make it mandatory and even go further to even get some facility from the bank for metering purpose. And they can do their financials to justify that if we meter SYZ, this is the number of consumers we have, if they pay an average consumption rate of XYZ, this is the financial projection that we have, and we're able to get more money for the operation, and you can recoup the lending money that you have given to the operation. But then the government has this very serious responsibility to create an avenue for DISCOs, for those who are in production, so that they can sustain that environment. Then when the metering is done, then those countries, DISCO in particular, can have revenue assurance in terms of their money coming, rather than these corrupt and sharp practices in the industry where people give you estimated billing for electricity you don't consume. So when you have a prepaid option, if you are not there and the light doesn't come in 1 week, then it zeroes out. When the electricity comes, the billing starts. So the company themselves must be disciplined to find a way to remove those people who don't desire change in those management.
Talking about sharp practices, don't you think it's of necessity to actually investigate if electricity is actually being subsidized in Nigeria? Taking a reference or example or lessons from what happened with fuel subsidy, where it was found out that some group of persons were actually being subsidized rather than the larger population. Rather than removing the subsidy, don't you think there's a need to do a proper investigation to even find out what subsidy or who is involved, who is actually being subsidized? Like some people criticized, are you saying the federal government is subsidizing for darkness?
That is not an entering point to this discussion. The point here is that we have a regulatory agency, the Electricity Regulatory Commission. They are the ones that can tell us whether the government is subsidizing electricity. But if you see it from the initial investment that were made when the DISCO came into being, the government still provided some money for them to operate. Maybe those monies are considered as subsidy, I don't know. I don't have adequate information, so I cannot really speak in specific term. First, but you have an agency, so the agency will let us know who the subsidy, which companies are collecting those subsidies for the provision of electricity. I know the government has another one, they call Nigerian Bulk Purchase Commission, has an interface with this DISCO. But I don't have sufficient information, so I can't speak to that specifically. But the point is, these businesses are private business. Encouragement should be made for more players to come in. Then whatever stake the government have in those businesses, they should find a way to divest from those businesses so that we see them as a private entity, not devoid of regulation, so that they can get more investment and make more profit. So if the electricity is available, I'm sure people will be willing to pay for it, even in spite of the relatively high tariff that we currently are contesting in this regard. So the government has a role, the existing DISCO, then the consumer, as the consuming public, should find a way to go to the Consumer Protection Council that has the responsibility to check the impact the services have on consumers. Then we may have the true picture from the perspective, whether the government is subsidizing darkness. I don't know.
All right, let's take it from the point of the argument of the DISCOs that they want a charge that is cost reflective. On the end of the consumer wants services that is charge reflective. So how can a balance be created? Because eventually we might see an increase in electricity tariff. Now, if government succeeds in removing subsidy, whether civil society organizations engage them in some talks, there are protests or not, at the end of the day, if subsidy is removed, what that would mean is that we'll find an increase in electricity tariff. So what is the way to ensure that the cost reflective charge, in quotes, is equal to a charge reflective service?
I think we already
service reflective charge.
Yeah, we spoke to that in this conversation. Essentially, if you want to get your revenue, then you must improve on your operational efficiency. Your operational efficiency here means mentoring your consumer.
But they've been struggling with that.
Yeah, no, what I'm trying to say that if that tariff comes to stay, if you don't do the right thing, they are going to have a challenge in terms of your ability to provide electricity, your ability to justify your tariff vis-a-vis the provision of service. So if there's a disconnect in that chain of, then there's going to be a problem. So the point I'm saying is that for them, if the government remove the tariff to sustain their business, they must find a way to provide adequate modern metering so that you can justify the prepayment regime that will help you to sustain your revenue.
Should it be a condition imposed on them, on the DISCOs, that before you increase tariff, meters must be provided to every consumer?
I think that's a wise decision for any business person to do. So as a business, if they want to sustain that business, then metering is an essential component of their service offering. So if that component of that service offering is not there, there'll be a service failure that will impact negatively on their operation.
All right. If the federal government is going to remove electricity subsidy, what are some of the lessons we can deduce from what happened with the removal of fuel subsidy here? and that can help the federal government plan better or strategize better when it needs, when the need to remove electricity subsidy arises. Do you expect that kind of approach that was deployed to that of fuel subsidy, where when the president was sworn in, he announced that subsidy is gone? What is your take on how systemic this can be done so that it won't have a ripple effect on Nigerians, businesses, and at a crucial time like this, do you consider it necessary?
First, I think there's a mutual distrust between the public and the government. So the first thing to do is the government has to be strategic in terms of providing communication to citizens. Number two, in my view, there should be a roadmap to phasing out the electricity subsidy, but the politics of it, like what happened to the fuel subsidy for a long time, should be open to the public. These are the numbers. These are the agencies. These are what we've been paying. This is when we intend to remove it. Even if the subsidy, you put a unit price into it, you can equally graduate the process of removing it so that the impact is not felt in the same way the fuel subsidy has, and it's not appropriate at this particular point in time because you are dealing with one major issue of the fuel subsidy that you have not been able to resolve. So what I will advise those who are in the corridors of power is to provide the roadmap, a strategic communication flow, telling the public these are the issues and this is what we want to do with the roadmap. They must be strategic, the information must be provided, and those milestones must be seen by the public. If not, that same policy will be seen from the same perspective of that mistrust between the public and the government. What I think, it is not the right time, because if you look at the cost of living, which is a major challenge, the government is releasing grains, I don't know, for almost 2 weeks now. I don't see where those grains are for now. So let's see how we can find a way to put a document in the public. This IMF releasing news release and all that, to a very large extent, equally threatens the government. IMF should not have the responsibility to communicate to the Nigerian public when they come to have discussions with those in government. It should be the responsibility of the government to say, we had a meeting with IMF, our numbers are not looking very good in this direction. These are the advisory. As a government, this is what we want to do going forward. So once you put those things in the public space, people are jittery, you have a problem you are managing, you are not able to resolve, you are adding another one. I don't think that is good for nation building.
Even looking at the, some of the IMF recommendations, what's your take on it? The government of Nigeria seems to be going along the lines of recommendations of the IMF. Do you think caution is required at some level?
I think so. I think some of the information that is provided by these Bretton Woods institutions, in some respects, are advisory. But then the government, when they provide those advisory, the government need to look at its numbers again. What are the leakages even within the public sector, and see how they can block those leakages rather than having outright report that the IMF say we can no longer sustain electricity subsidy. Therefore, we are going to remove the subsidy. Okay? So the government must look at those reports with deeper insight beyond those I always argue that there are a lot of international conspiracy from the West. So a government that does not look at things deeply may always fall into this trap of these multilateral institutions that have become the best advisors. We must not always look to the West. They equally have their challenges. We should have local solution to our problem. And we must be strategic in the way we think and the way we communicate to the public.
Now, going along that line before we go on a quick break, using local data. We have the National Bureau of Statistics that provides statistics on different aspects of the economy. Should the government be working more closely with data from the NBS in providing solutions or in dealing with the challenges of the Nigerian economy?
Yeah, the data are there. Another question you must take, Blessing, is that who sponsors this data?
But the NBS is supposed to be independent.
No, it's a government agency. But if you go and look at their mandate and the kind of multilateral corporations that come from some of these development partners, in quote, you see the hand of some of these people in some of those things they do. So the figures are there as benchmark, but then in international development, the language and the conversation now is that evidence-based data. So to what extent are these data that you aggregate from the field justifiable? Do you stimulate data just for the fun of creating data? Those are the conversation that we must do. So there should be other data. You have research data independent of the government. So what are the indices? What are your research data? Are they valid? Are they reliable? So once you're able to determine that, then you'll be able to have a way forward in that regard. But the government must not often depend on these Bretton Woods institutions to make decisions that affect their citizens.
Interesting. The conversation is getting bigger, but we need to go on a short break now. We will return shortly to have more discussions. Stay with us.
In the heart of sub-Saharan Africa, where commerce meets progress, welcome to Souq News, your source for business, economy, and development insight that drive nations forward. From the vibrant streets of Lagos, Africa's fastest economic hub, Souq News takes you on a journey of discovery, analyzing and reporting the facts that lay the foundation for growth and development. We don't just report the news, we create it. Souq News is more than a channel. It is a catalyst for change, spotlighting the stories that shape economies, inspire entrepreneurs, and fuel progress. Covering business, finance, technology, energy, and many more, Souq News provides a daily deep dive into the stories that matter, interviews with industry titans, and analysis that empowers your understanding of economic landscape. Join us daily as we dissect, discuss, and deliver the most relevant and factual news on business and the economy. Souq News is your trusted guide, empowering you with the knowledge to make informed decisions.
I'm okay.
My name is Raymond Bola Brown.
Hi, my name is Fred Amata, and you're on to Souq News.
If you are watching this channel for the first time, make sure you continue to watch it, because this is Souq News.
Shout out to Souq News. Actually, I don't know. I really enjoyed the little moment I spent with you, and I think with more of this.
Souq News. Here's the Souq News who had the courage to transcend a locked off camera and actually have a conversation with a human being. It's a pleasure, Souq News. Thank you very much.
The challenge of governance is to see how we can leverage what is on the ground and convert this to wealth for the people.
Russia, China are gaining entry into Africa, and it would appear that some Western countries are losing out.
You're working as an expatriate worker, then you're paid in your currency. But then if you must spend those money, you need to convert those money to the local currency to spend.
For Social Security to work, we need to know exactly how many we are. We don't have a precise number. We need to know exact location of people.
When we address this exchange rate volatility, we will see definitely cost of goods and services will come down.
From a security point of view, we should employ the technology to ensure that we can track individuals and goods within the continent.
This is Early Exchange with Femi Ayodele.
You know, the Early Exchange is all about shaping policy and advancing development. With our conversation today, we're set to give you the best of programming.
And Blessing Aiche.
We do hope that you enjoy every time you spend with us here today. The world needs peace. The world needs to come to a round table and find solutions to the pockets of troubles.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Let's go. All right, it's the early exchange and we're still looking at the proposed removal of electricity bill, what might likely be the effect if that happens. Don't forget you can also share your view. Let your voice be heard on this program. All you just have to do is go on our social media platform, on our YouTube page to share your view. Sam Oruwoje is still here with us, shaping policy and advancing development by looking at this development. Glad to know you're still here with us.
My pleasure.
All right, now let's look at what happened a few days ago where the president had to sign the electricity amended bill. Now, the amended version is to set apart, is for the GenCos to set apart 5% of their revenue for host communities. You know, we talked about the issue of community engagement, the issue of CSR, and some of these things, how sensitive they are to the host communities. Do you consider this to be a welcome development? And now that this bill is signed into law, what will you expect will play out with the impact of this bill being signed into law?
Taking cognizance of host community is central to a good business ecosystem. So that's host community bill, which is a component of the amendment to that law, is good. And what is beautiful about the host community engagement there is that the community will form that association that will liaise with those businesses. So it's not that it's a kind of corporate social responsibility where the GenCo will just be giving handouts to the community. So there's a proper engagement, a board of trustees from the community. The community has the prerogative to choose those who form the trustee. The trustees will be registered like a trustee, like a foundation. Then the GenCo must have somebody on that board. And the board decides what is imperative for that community, what the community wants, if it's maybe water, whatever the community wants, that's what that 5%, and the other levels of engagement to see how the monitoring of those 5% is done. So I think across board, including the Petroleum Act, Petroleum Industry Act, PIA, had the same element. But this idea of host communities becoming an omnibus for every community is equally challenging, because where specific host community, those 5% must be specific, not saying that once you are contiguous to a host community, then you are part of that host community. That conversation again must be renewed in those laws. So if you are generating hydroelectricity from Kenji Dam, the host community is that community, not the whole of, where is it now? Are they now in Kogi or in Kwara? I'm not too sure, but I know they used to be in Kwara at the time. So these are on Niger. So these are issues, then it's good. But to what extent these companies will abide by those laws, and those who are punishing them, I hope they don't go and place a demand on them for under the table transaction. And at the end of the day, the host community does not benefit.
Now, this demand for the GenCos or the power generating companies to provide some fund or some level of development for the host community, does it arrive from the failure of companies performing corporate social responsibility?
No, it's not really a failure. The model of social responsibility has changed over the years, so most companies are finding it difficult. It's not just that you provide pipe-borne water, you put a signboard that you are sponsoring something. Those eras are gone. The new dimension to corporate social responsibility is that, are you ethical, even in practice? Even the profit you make, Are they ethical? So most of these companies are finding it difficult because of the demand from citizens across the globe on not just saying, yes, give me some little package, then I now feel fine. Yes, good. Are your profits sustainable? Do you overcharge the community? Your environmental impact assessment that you did, will it not impact negatively on the citizens around us? So the ecosystem of corporate social responsibility has been enlarged, and the laws enabling it are now very, very, very solid law. Unlike before, you just provide some social incentive, then you can make some claim for corporate tax. But now the demand is critical. What you need to do when you put a social responsibility in place, you must see it from even the business model, to what extent, how sustainable the impact, does it have impact on climate change? Those are the systems. So it's difficult now for most organizations to really reach out beyond the small corporate philanthropy that they used to do, and they have so much mileage. The demand is higher. That's the challenge. Not that they have failed. The expectation, citizen expectation has become so incremental, and the demands are high. So they are careful in terms of how they engage with citizens.
Let's talk about energy transition. Looking at the energy mix in Nigeria, what are some of the critical steps you expect the federal government to take to facilitate this transition globally? You know, the transition from fossil to seeking alternative sources that could help supplement and even sustain the energy mix in Nigeria. Today you hear that the national grid has collapsed, and tomorrow it's another. So what are some of the critical steps that should be taken by the federal government to sustain our energy mix, exploring alternative sources rather than depending on the conventional fossil fuels?
There's an international politics when you talk about renewable energy. The West, who are the greatest polluter, the culprits, they have made some climate financing commitments that have not come into full swing. But then, when you talk about the mix, China, for example, still generate electricity from coal. So what stops us in Africa for investing in coal as
The challenge of governance is to see how we can leverage what is on the ground and convert this to wealth for the people.
Russia, China are gaining entry into Africa, and it would appear that some Western countries are losing out.
You're working as an expatriate worker, then you're paid in your currency. But then if you must spend those money, you need to convert those money to the local currency to spend.
For Social Security to work, we need to know exactly how many we are. We don't have a precise number. We need to know exact location of people.
When we address this exchange rate volatility, we will see definitely cost of goods and services will come down.
From a security point of view, we should employ the technology to ensure that we can track individuals and goods within the continent.
This is Early Exchange with Femi Ayodele.
You know, the Early Exchange is all about shaping policy and advancing development. With our conversation today, we're set to give you the best of programming.
And Blessing Aiche.
We do hope that you enjoy every time you spend with us here today. The world needs peace. The world needs to come to a round table and find solutions to the pockets of troubles.
Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Glad to know you're still there with us. We're still looking at the issue of electricity, subsidy, which is very crucial. When you hear the word subsidy in Nigeria, it means a lot of things, and that's why we need to talk about it. Let's give the opportunity for Sam to wrap up his thoughts on the issue of subsidy in Nigeria.
Yeah, I was just speaking to the West, who are the major polluter, wants us to move in one direction when you talk about energy transitioning, particularly into renewable energy from fossil fuel. But the point I'm making is that we need to balance the mix. As they're asking us to move in one direction, they are equally exploiting coal to provide electricity. So we need to sustain that mix. But then we must equally look at it from the circular economy approach, where you can generate waste, then from waste to providing electricity, like composites from dump sites can be converted so that we can then mini-grid. Thank God that that industry has been deregulated, is now on the concurrent list, so states, local government can provide energy. So industries within certain locations, once they produce certain energy, they can put the surplus into the mini-grid. So maybe that will help in terms of sustaining the conversation we have earlier. That might reduce the tariff if certain communities, certain organizations, even certain NGO and small manufacturing are able to provide. So renewable energy, that's the way to go, but we have over 20 years transitioning mechanism to get to that level. But we should not always just look to the West when they tell us things. They are still using coal. We have great deposit of coal around the Enugu, Souq area. So let the government find a way to exploit that so that we can provide electricity for Nigerians.
All right, thank you very much, Sam Oruji, for your wonderful contributions on the show this morning. And that's where we wrap it up today. Thank you for your time with us. Let's do this again tomorrow, 8 a.m. West African time. That's when early exchange begins on Souq News. I ask that you stay with Souq News the rest of the day. I'm Blessing Aichi. Have yourself a wonderful day.
And from me to you, keep making that little effort to get better, because everything big in life starts from little. Don't forget, Early Exchange returns tomorrow. I am Femi Ayodele. Bye for now.